This is my first public webinar for this 2025. And as I mentioned previously, we will talk about endpoint DLP. Let me share here. I will be side by side. Stand out this way. Okay. And finally, Darren is here. Thanks, Darren, to join today. Darren will be my co-pilot here today. He will helping me with your questions, and he have a lot of experience on endpoint DLP. We worked on the past on Microsoft, and I don't know, Darren, if you want to present yourself, and we can go forward with this presentation.
Yes, so Darren Bonial, as Sebastian said, we worked closely together when Sebastian was at Microsoft. Unfortunately, decided to move on to pastures new. Been with Microsoft now for 6 years, and one of the areas I work in Microsoft is the data loss prevention under the Purview banner. Very interested in EDLP and to understand any scenarios that you've come up against, because it can have a few of its little nuances, which hopefully Sebastian will be able to address as part of this presentation today. So thank you. And thank you, Sebastian, for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure. We have a lot of experience working together, and that will be great to have to you here in this presentation. I will go very quick on the slide. I am reusing some slide from my past session on about data loss prevention. In this one, we will work only on endpoint DLP. But if you want to review past sessions, I am adding my YouTube channel here on the chat. The other thing that is very important, please, you can scan the QR. I will share later the link, but for me, it is very helpful that you are able to complete the survey at the end of the presentation. We will talk about global concept. As I mentioned, this will take us a lot of time, the live demo. For that reason, I will try to go very quick in some global concept. The first thing that we need to understand is the data leak vectors. It happens that today we can have an internal user. That internal user have a computer assigned. Through this computer can access through third-party applications, can use a local drive, internet access, external devices, printers. This same user can access to local repos, share information with areas inside the organization, process inside the organization. The same user can start storing information, sensitive information on Microsoft 365 services, other cloud services, or Azure. The same user can connect later from outside of our corporate network, accessing and sharing the same information. For that same reason, all these red lines can be considered as data leak vectors. For that same reason, today, start discussing about endpoint DLP is a very important topic. And today, the idea is to show to you all the stuff that you need to have in mind to start working on it. The first thing to understand is we can use different kind of data classifiers. You have the sensitive information types, more than 300 today, that are available through Microsoft 365. But here there is something very important. Some of those sensitive information types are not downloaded, are not loaded locally, and we will see on the DLP settings that we need to enable something to go to internet and ask if our document, our files, match with some premium sensitive information types or exact data match or inclusive to use OCR. We will discuss a little more about that. But as I mentioned, there is some data classifiers that are used directly when we are connecting to internet. If not, that more than 300 is reduced around 200 and plus. That can be review internally and detect. But for others, we need to go to the cloud. Here, I have, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you will see an old webinar about sensitive information types where I go more in deep on these technologies. But here we can see the rate related to false positive and false negative and how these different sensitive information types can help us to identify and reduce that. In general, we will need to set a primary element and some supporting element. That are the data classifiers, the sensitive information types that we need to use to work with DLP. Something that I will try to explain during the live demo is related to the confidence level. The confidence level is very important in this point because a high confidence level require more evidence, reduce the false positive, but the false negative can be increased. In a low confidence, we will use less evidence or the absence of evidence. The false positive will be increased, but the false negatives can be reduced. And not all the data classifiers have a low, medium, and high confidence. There exists some sensitive information types that have only medium, or the famous credit card number have only low and high, doesn't have a medium confidence. This is very important because try to get this balance permit to avoid the business disruption. For that reason, it's very important every time that we will work on data loss prevention is understand very well how these data classifiers works in low, medium, high confidence, because we can disrupt the business or that can generate an IT overload because we will have a lot of support ticket because something is not working properly. Or we can finally lose some false positive, increasing the false negative. That is very important to have in mind and understand how works all the sensitive information types. And the data classifiers, and again, you are invited to review that whole webinar about sensitive information types. Is very important because the data classifiers can be used on sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, auto labeling, Microsoft Defender for Cloud app, e-discovery, content search, and several other Purview technologies. The first thing that we need to have in mind to use endpoint DLP, we need to have Microsoft 365 E5 exist, and I will use the Aaron page. This one can be very helpful. Let me share here on chat. We have I have an ex-colleague on Microsoft that work in this page, but this one permit me to understand all the components that I have with my license, and particularly if we need to work with endpoint DLP, you can have Microsoft 365 E3, and you can buy an add-on that is called Information Protection and Governance. That is the smallest add-on that you can buy to have endpoint DLP and the rest of data classifiers and inclusive DLP for teams. This one can be very helpful, and it's not required to have a complete Microsoft 365 E5. Having Microsoft 365 E3, you can get this specific add-on, and we can start working on Endpoint DLP. Let me back to the presentation. As I mentioned, Endpoint DLP is part of Microsoft 365 E5, or this add-on, Information Protection and Governance. And this will permit us to monitoring the devices, track the different activities over files, have some cloud protection and browser protection, control the external devices like USB removable external devices, printers, and more. And we can have several capabilities that we can use. I don't know, we have a question here on the chat. Something was asking about the MIP IP scanner for on-prem. Okay. That is an old presentation about the MIP scanner. You can find that well on my YouTube channel. And the rest is understand how all the DLP. I will share this presentation. You will be able to download. I will add the link in the comment for in the video when I upload it to YouTube. You will find the link. And let's go to the live demo. As always, I say, finally, PowerPoint is the best compiler on the world. All the stuff works on PowerPoint, but the best, and I believe the most important point here is see how all of this works in a live environment. And for that reason, give me a moment. I will jump quickly to a device, and I will start showing all the configuration. If you have any question or comment, you can use the chat to start sharing all of that. Okay. Here we are. We have the Purview. Let's go from the beginning. The new portal is the Purview portal, purview.microsoft.com. The old compliance portal was deprecated, and today we need to work all here on Purview. When we access to Purview, we will see a couple of quick access here in the middle. If the data loss prevention doesn't appear, we can go through view all solutions, or here at the top left, we have the list of solution, and we can find data loss prevention. Both places are can be used to reach DLP. Now, the other thing that is very important to have here is, let me go here, on settings. In the same Purview portal, and we need to use this one. This is very important. In the Purview portal, we need to go to start working with DLP. We need to go to settings because there is a couple of things that we need to configure for DLP. The first thing, and a common misunderstanding, is MDE is not required for Endpoint DLP. MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, is not required for Endpoint DLP, but is the same script that is used to enroll the devices. In that order of idea, the same script that we can find here under onboarding, if you compare with the script that is released by Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is the same one, but it's not required to use MDE. On my environment, in the environment that I am using today, I don't have MDE. I don't have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. I have only Endpoint DLP. In that order of idea, something that happens to me on the past with the customer, they was using MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but the Endpoint DLP was not working. And what's happened is here in the Microsoft Purview portal, under settings, under devices, device onboarding, we need to enable the device monitoring for Endpoint DLP for Windows and for Mac OS. No matter if you are using MDE and it's turning on MDE, in the Purview portal, we need turning on for Endpoint DLP. That is very important to have in mind, that we need to turn it on to start using Endpoint DLP. Then, other configurations that we need to set. Someone is asking on chat about the agent, and that was correct maybe 10 months ago. Maybe Darren have the specific date, but more than 6 months ago, maybe almost a year, Microsoft make a change on the Windows operating system, and the agent used in the backend, in the background, was split. And now you have a specific agent that is running the endpoint DLP and another agent that is running the MDE service. Year ago, that was using the same agent. Right now, in the latest version of Windows, that was a split and are running in different agents. The first thing to have in mind, remember, I'm in the Microsoft Purview portal under settings on data loss prevention, is this endpoint DLP settings. This one is very important to have in mind. The first one is the one that I was trying to explain when I was talking about data classifiers. There is a couple of special data classifiers that are not downloaded locally. It's around 200 plus something that are downloaded locally, and the device is able to identify a credit card number or an SSN, but other special sensitive information types like full address, full names, full password are bundles, are a special sensitive information type, and we need to use this advanced classification, scanning, and protection. In that case, the system will go to internet to validate if the file contain these special sensitive information types like trainable classifier or exact data match. And we can set a bandwidth limit if that is required. Then, and let me, I have opened that link with those details. Let me open here and share. Let me show this. Here is this is the right page to start working if you need a public page for endpoint DLP. And here you can see the advanced classification, something that we was discussing, an exact data match, trainable classifier, and some special entities needs to be go to internet to validate that. Not all the sensitive data, the data classifier, are downloaded locally, and exists some limit that we need to have on mind. Now, I was saying that MDE is not required. Let me be a little more clear. MDE is not required for Windows 10 or Windows 11 or Mac OS for endpoint devices. But few months ago was enabled the capability to add Windows Server to endpoint DLP. And to add Windows Server to endpoint DLP, you need to have MDE. If you want to expand endpoint DLP capabilities to Windows Server, in that case, you need to have at least two servers with Microsoft Defender for endpoint. Let's continue. And I was viewing this one because here we can find all the exclusion paths that are recommended for Windows or for Mac OS to add. What happened, at least, and I believe this is something that maybe Microsoft can improve, the path exclusion are not available by default. You need to add one by one the exclusion for Windows and for macOS. I hope that in some moment Microsoft said something to add the default ones and add all of them. But in that case, at least today, you need to add one by one all the exclusion paths that you can find at least in the public documentation. It's something that is not mandatory, but if you doesn't add this path exclusion, you can have a lot of noise under Activity Explorer and maybe some false positive. I remember to see a lot of false positive, at least for source code. If you use the trinal classifier for source code, that normally create a lot of activities because every time that you open a page in the backend, you have source code for that web page. And that for that reason, maybe add some exclusion can be very important in that point. Then coming something that is very important and that will take me a little more time to explain, and is related to this one. Set up the evidence collection. What's happened? Today, if you have some experience with Activity Explorer, and if I filter for, no, activity here is, for DLP rule match, give me a moment, it's taking time. Through Activity Explorer, I am able to find the data, and inclusive if the DLP rule match with SharePoint or with OneDrive, I will be able to see the source and see the original document. But I can do this because this information live on cloud, and that permit me to access to the data and review the original document that is matching with my DLP rule match. Here you can see that I'm able to see those matches. Depend if the file is labeled or not. There is a couple of things, but I am able to see that information. But for endpoint, because the file resides locally, I am not able to do that action. Not by default. To have that capability, to start viewing those files that are matching with my DLP rules criteria, I need to set a manage store. And here coming some big challenge. I will show you. At least my subscription is running yet. The first thing that we need to do to start collecting the data is create a storage account. Under the storage account, I call it this one DLP data collector. You can see that the URL is DLP data collector blob. This is the general, and here we have a container. In the storage, I need to create a container, this DLP container. And the big deal, and maybe that is one of the most challenging steps, I will share. I have a slide that explains that easily, but I will explain this in this case. We need to create some specific roles to get that information. What happened? Microsoft Purview. To give access to the endpoint DLP to write in this storage account in this specific container, we need to create a specific role. This specific role contains some specific permissions. Here we can see the JSON that contains the permissions. How we can create these roles? I will explain quickly here. You can come in here. You can take the first one. You can set clone. And here, Purview DLP endpoint collector. We need to create a specific role name. This role name needs to be given to the entire organization. That is something that today will be replaced with this Microsoft Managed Store, but it's still on Purview. But something that we need to have in mind is this specific configuration. I clone the owner, but right now you can see that I don't have any permission. To give the permissions, and let me share the specific link. I will share the link on the chat. In that link, you have all the definitions, but it's very simple. The first permission that we need to give to all the users to give the capabilities to the endpoint DLP to write in this storage account is go to here, add permission. We need to look in for Microsoft Storage. Here is Microsoft Storage. And we have two different permissions. We need actions permissions and we need data actions. You will see in the link that I share on chat that are something called user actions, that these are, and data actions. The first one that we will set are the user actions. On the user actions, we can find for Microsoft storage account, blob services, and we need to read list blob services. We need to read get blob services properties. No, that is let me go here. That is for the other one for the auditors. I will show. I will explain that one. List blob services under containers. Here under containers, I need the get blob container and write put blob containers. Add. Now I need to add permissions again. I will filter by Microsoft Storage. Where is here is Microsoft Storage, and now I need to select data actions. I can filter on the same way. I am copying the string from the web page that I share. And in this one, I need to select the right blob and add blob content. With these specific granular permissions that we can set, we can give to the endpoint DLP the capability to connect to the storage and upload the different files that matches with our DLP rules. Nevertheless, no matter that I will assign this role to the entire organization, I need to do, or at least to all the users that are applying the endpoint DLP. Here you can see this is the same JSON that will match with the link with the public page that I share. And I have my Purview role for endpoint DLP. For the data analyst, for the users that need to access, to review, the same that I was showing here under Activity Explorer. In this case, we are viewing Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, because as I mentioned previously, that information is on the cloud. This works, but for endpoint, we need to configure this specific. But this is not enough. That is a tricky part. This is not enough. Purview, and let me open another page with Purview. Purview.microsoft.com. To review content, another couple of permissions are required. Something that normally happens, you set correctly the permissions on the storage account to access to the data that is collected on this storage in this container. But additionally, here under Microsoft Purview on settings, we have some specific role groups to review the data, the same permissions are required for Content Explorer or the new name Data Explorer. You need to set these two permissions. No matter that the permissions in the storage account are correctly set, no matter that you have the license, if you don't have these two roles, you will not be able to reach that information and review. You need to give. It's very easy. You come into role groups, you filter by content, and you can see. Something that is very annoying sometimes, if you are using PIM, Privileged Identity Management, and you are set with Compliance Administrator, that suppose is the big boss in the Purview portal, this role group doesn't appear when you are using PIM. You need to have assigned directly an active assignment for Compliance Administrator role to see these role groups. It's very common that you are using Privileged Identity Management, you request the Compliance Administrator, you come in here, and this is hide. You need to have active the assignment, or you can use PowerShell to assign the specific role if you need. That is another option to work with this one. Okay, let's come back to the DLP settings. This is the collection for file. I will not go in deep with the rest of configuration, but in the page that I share, show the specific steps to configure the other permissions related to audit users. Then we can set some network shares as an exclusion or coverage. Normally, and let me go back to this slide. When you are inside of the corporate network and you are accessing to different paths, some of those paths are available to contain some sensitive information. For that reason, we can create some exclusion to avoid have noise every time that we are copying certain information in a certain path. In that order of idea, we can start setting that configuration here. We can restrict some applications. In this case, I create a group to restrict some compressors, WinRAR, 7-zip. We will play with that configuration. That is another big deal. Not all the extensions are supported. There is some extensions, special extensions that are not supported, but we can add some additional extensions to exclude and avoid some noise. The same happened with Bluetooth applications. In this case, I will show with a virtual machines. I don't have a Bluetooth to show, but I will try to make some other samples. Related to browsers and domains, we can set some unallowed browsers and some domains that we can block. This will be very helpful. There is, for service domain, there is two different approach. We can block certain domains or we can allow certain domains. If in your organization the access to third-party cloud services or external services is very restrictive, can be better to set an allow and set only the domains that are able to reach. In that case, all the rest of the domain will be blocked. Or the other option is start adding domain by domain, but in that case, that can be a long work to list all the possible domains that I need to block. This is new. We have some capabilities to identify AI website that can be very helpful for all the stuff related to Copilot. I will explain something later. Additional settings. This is business justification for policy tips. We can use the default options or we can customize. The big deal is this customized business justification is not doesn't have support for other language. That means you can write here on Spanish, English, German, French, but there is no way to configure right now in the backend other languages. In the sensitivity labels, and I have another public webinar on the past about sensitivity labels, I was explaining that using PowerShell, you can set other languages. In that case, if someone on France is opening on French, they can see the labels on French, or they can see the labels on German, or they can see the labels on Spanish. We need to configure that, but that feature have the capability to support multiple language. Unfortunately, this capability doesn't support multiple language yet. I know that the product group was working to add those capabilities, but is not ready. Nevertheless, if you use the default options coming in the different language because are built in the same operating system. But if you use custom, that is not supported yet. Here, I was explaining this was enabled maybe less than 6 months. We can add Windows servers for endpoint DLP. Here coming another misunderstanding. And let me go very quick at this point to explain that. Someone mentioned on the chat the MIP scanner. The MIP scanner, and let me create a policy to show that. The MIP scanner have an option for DLP, but that DLP is not in real time and depend on the cycle of the MIP scanner, formerly called AAP scanner. And that one, you need to have that server. And when we work on on-premise repos, we are able to identify some documents that contain sensitive information types on file shares and move those files to a quarantine. That is all. That is the DLP that coming from the MIP scanner. Here we can see the actions is restrict or remove the files to a quarantine. That is all. With the endpoint DLP for server, we are able to get the same capabilities for endpoint DLP for Windows machine or macOS machine. That means avoid to copy to USB, avoid to copy to clipboard, avoid to copy to a browser, and several other actions. That is very important to have on mind. And here I will take the chance to talk about Copilot. This is this is a parenthesis. Here was added maybe less than 2 months ago, Microsoft 365 Copilot that is in preview. If you are start working with Copilot right now, this can be your best friend because in this one, we can create rules. And sorry for this parenthesis, but I believe that is very important because several organizations are getting Copilot. And here we can set under content contains, we can identify sensitivity labels. We can identify sensitivity labels, and we can prevent to Copilot to access to process that information. You are invited this if you start using Copilot and if you're using sensitivity labels, this one can be very helpful because you can prevent to Copilot to access very highly sensitive information with this one. But let's go back to the configuration. Okay, we can onboard servers. That is great. This is another very good and annoying option. Always audit file activity for devices. Here, no matter if you have DLP rules or not, no matter if you have DLP rules or not, if the device is onboarded, we will trace and we will see on Activity Explorer several activities related to file access, file read, file modify, file created. We will have a lot of those activities. I saw in some customers 100,000 of per day activities or millions of activities related to file access, file modify. And that happened because we are not adding the exceptions here at the top, the exclusions. We are not adding the exclusion, and several temporary files are created when you reach a web page, and all of that start generating a lot of noise. But for other part, have this level of detail can be very helpful to trace some activities. We need to identify, or we need to start excluding previously to start using this always audit file activity. And here coming another common error. This file modify and file created or file read are not related to a DLP rule match. Inside, and I will try to show that through advanced hunting, when you have a DLP rule match for endpoint DLP, when you have a DLP rule match for endpoint DLP, exists a specific inside and a nested field that contain if that match was for a file copy to clipboard, file copy to something, but are not the same that we can see commonly here outside on Activity Explorer. Okay, let's continue with the configuration. The rest of the capabilities are related to printer groups, file extensions group, USB devices, network shared, and VPN. This one permit me, as an example, create a printer group for the financial area and permit only to the financial area print in those specific printers and avoid to start printing sensitive information type in another printer that is located in another floor or in another office. That can be very helpful. If you use, in some companies, we give some USB devices that have BitLocker or other solution to encrypt the data. We can add those specific values to identify and permit to copy only over supported USB devices. Something happened with the VPN and network shares, we are able to get that information. The other big deal normally here is enable the analytics. This permit me to have several information to create and get some logs. Just-in-time protection, that is another capability that permit to take some actions more quickly, but this needs some additional configuration, and that will take me more time to explain, but I will try to share some information. I want to go to the next steps. The next steps, we need to onboard the devices. We can onboard the devices. Windows Server, Windows 11, Windows 10, use the same script. Use the same script. You need to download the script. You can run manually, or there is other options to run that script through a group policy, endpoint configuration manage, mobile device management, or BDI. There is different ways. You can use any of those to onboard the devices. And after the devices are onboarded, we can start viewing all those devices here. And the first thing that I will do is onboard a device. I have this new device. I have the component here. And to onboard manually, we need to open the command prompt with admin rights. And the only thing that we need to do is run the script. Yes. And that will start enabling the service. This is another very important thing here is the big difference between Microsoft Purview Endpoint DLP and other Endpoint DLP solution is Endpoint DLP coming built in on the operating system. That means this script, the only thing that is doing is waking up that specific agent that's coming on the same operating system. Another big deal on the past, endpoint DLP is available on Windows 10 or 11 Pro or Enterprise. I saw several times in different customers trying to enable endpoint DLP and inclusive. You can run the script and you can see that all is running well, but Windows Business, Windows for Family, Windows Standard, and other version of Windows doesn't have the endpoint DLP component. You need to have Windows Pro or Windows Enterprise to run endpoint DLP. That is very important. And that is all. That is all. With that, after I run that, let me go to, again, to the device onboarding. Let me refresh. And okay, not yet. We will see in a while. Sometimes can take 5 minutes to show that the new device is onboarded. The device will show us onboarded, but by the way, can take until 2 hours to refresh the policies and apply all the configurations.
Sebastian, there's a quick
Yes.
question in the chats from Elizabeth. She's asked, the device is AD joined or AD registered before you can onboard?
In this case, I can share later how you can do that, but this is a Microsoft Entra enroll device. It's a virtual machine that I enrolled previously on Microsoft Entra. I am logging with my Microsoft Entra user. There is a way. You need to do some specific step, but let me restart this one to get the changes quickly. But is Entra ID join it. And there exists a way, there is a trick that permits to connect to a virtual machine. Maybe if you was working on the past on different machines, you are aware that try to make a remote desktop connection using a Microsoft Entra account is not permitted or generate a lot of problems. And finally, the people start connecting with the local account. But there is some step that can be do it that permit to take a remote desktop control with the Microsoft 365 account. Inclusive in this case, I made that for this VM and the rest of the machines that they have. You can see here that I am able to connect with my Microsoft 365 account to the VM. There is a couple of steps that need to be do it, but it's something that you can do. And in this case, I am running this script to enable the endpoint DLP. Something that we need to be aware, we need to assign the license to the user. If the user doesn't have a correctly license, we will see, that here the device appear as onboarded, but the user is not valid. Something that was improved in the past year, that was a little more than a year. Today, when you select the devices, more details are shown in a side pane. Previously, that was not able to review, but here we can see all the information and if the file, the computer is have the right policies, and several things. A new capability, that was added to make some troubleshooting, and we are still, we don't create any policy yet, but something to have in mind is here, I will show you, exists a PowerShell module that is called compliance utility. If you, I will chart this one, install module. I installed previously, but I will share on the chat. This one is compliance utility. This one was having several names. The last one is compliance utility. And in this one, some new capabilities was added. And one of those capabilities is check the DLP configuration. In that case, after you install that module, and you can call as compliance utility, this one was created previously for sensitivity labels. I use a lot for troubleshooting, but right now, some additional capabilities was added to identify that you are reaching all the endpoint URLs, which DLP rules and policies are reaching this account, and information about user license detail. That permit me to easily identify if I have the right license and the service. That is another thing. Maybe I have the license assigned, but the service is not enabled. I need to check all of that, and I can use this powerful model to troubleshoot. Other way, but it's a little more complex, is use the same MD analyzer. The MD analyzer can be used to see if the status and if the DLP rules are reaching this computer. Okay, let's go back to the policies. The first thing related to DLP policies, and I mentioned previously in several sessions, when you create something custom, normally almost all the services come in selected, but when you try to create a rule, the number of conditions and the number of actions are reduced. My recommendation always is split the policies. You need to see the policies like a rule container. You need to split the policies by service. And I have my policy here only for endpoint. Here I'm editing the endpoint DLP policy, and I will go through the different steps that we have available, and we'll start playing with the rules and see how all that information is shown. I don't know if you're aware about the admin unit. Admin unit is something that was built a few years ago. The organization are not using a lot yet. This is it's not the same an organizational unit, but this can be very helpful when you have a shared tenant. Happens that some organizations, groups, are using a same tenant for different companies. In that case, admin units can be very helpful to split all the admin activities per organization that live on the same tenant. Now, location, you can see only devices. And here on the advanced DLP rules, I have several. Another recommendation that normally I give to all my customers is try to use try to use a prefix for all your DLP rules. Why? Because when you are getting a long period, at least on Activity Explorer, you can see only the past 30 days. But when you do this action and you start filtering, I will add the filtering for DLP rule, is very complex. And let me add this one. Give me a moment. When I set that this one and I start viewing the rules, if the rules doesn't have a prefix on the name, it's more complex to easily identify if that rule apply over SharePoint, over OneDrive, Exchange, Endpoint, Power BI, or all the rest of services. For that reason, normally my recommendation is try to use a prefix that helps a lot to filtering the rules. And I will share another script solution. So maybe some of you know that I have several GitHub repos with several scripts. I built a script to export the data from Activity Explorer, and the advantage is through PowerShell, you can get more than 30 days. I was testing with 90 days without problems, and I know that other colleagues was using the script to get more than 90 days back from Activity Explorer, but using PowerShell. And this is the big deal. When I am not using a prefix, I don't know if this PCI is for Exchange, is for SharePoint, OneDrive, Endpoint. This not share. For that same reason, here you can see that in the policy, I am almost in all, I am using an EDLP to identify those rules are related to Endpoint DLP. Let me share very quick that specific site that I mentioned. Give me one moment, please. If you like a PowerShell, maybe this script can be helpful to export the data. As I mentioned, easily you can get 90 days back from Activity Explorer, and you can filter by workload or by operation. And let's see a common rule. I was creating this one for PII. The first thing is content contains. This is not mandatory. On the conditions, we can see that we can have inside the risk level, the content. This can be very helpful. The content is not labeled. If you was working with sensitivity labels and you are forcing to use sensitivity labels, you can start blocking any activity when the files are not labeled. We can use document properties, we can use several options, but in this case, I am using the content contains sensitive information types. Here, I recommend, again, my past webinar about sensitive information types. And this is another big deal, the group operator. On the past, I saw more than once that some customers, was annoying with Microsoft Purview because was not working the DLP. And the big deal was the rule was correctly created, but the big deal was the group operator was set in all of these instead of any of these. If you have the operator in all of these, you need to have at least one match for all of them, all the sensitive information that was set there. I am sharing on the chat the survey. I used to forget that. Please, if you can take, that will not take more than 2 minutes to complete. That is the survey. Okay, we have the content contains. We need to understand very well how works the different confidence level. And then, well, if you want to add exception in the new builder, you need to set a group and configure here. In this case, you can say if that contains sensitive information type, but as an example, the data is marked as public or testing data. If we are using a specific sensitivity label to mark our sample data, we can do something like this to identify the data that can be shared or not. And then we have the different actions. Let me show here, sorry, actions. On actions, we can restrict the access or encrypt the content. In that case, we can block the access to the data. Almost all these new actions was added recently. We can set a Power Automate workflow that permit to inform on a manager. We can run several things on Power Automate. We can audit and some activities only related to Microsoft Edge. Here, another point previous to forget that. Today, the new Edge browser have built in the agent that is required for endpoint DLP. Nevertheless, if in your environment you are using Firefox, Safari, or Chrome, you need to deploy a plugin. To use endpoint DLP on browsers that are not Edge, Firefox, Safari, Chrome, you need to deploy a plugin. That is very important to do. If you don't have the plugin, the endpoint DLP, at least with the activities related to browser, will not work. Please take that on mind, and not all the browser are supported. For that reason, I am mentioning very specifically Firefox, Safari, and Chrome. The rest of browser are not supported, and normally the best recommendation is use these global DLP settings that we was reviewing to block other browser, or if you're using Intune, you can block or you can force to a specific use Edge or Chrome or Firefox. There is different ways, but you need to reduce the possible browsers that you can use. That is the only way to run endpoint DLP on different browsers. Now, with all that on mind, we can see the common cases, that is audit or restrict activities on device. And we can have the capability to audit only. In this case, when we start with endpoint DLP deployment, we can start with audit only to identify the impact that we can have when we start using endpoint DLP. I saw that you are discussing about the data classifiers on the chat. Data classifiers can work, but are not perfect. Some of them needs to be improved, have some additional effort. If you start using a blocking, you can stop the business. And what we want to do is avoid to stop the business. In that case, we can start creating the rules only for audit purpose, because it's very common to identify common process inside organizations that, from a data security perspective, are bad process. The people make a lot of activities daily. There are common process, but from a data security perspective, those common process inside the organization, it can be bad process. And we need to identify those bad process, take some actions to avoid disrupt the activities. Well, we can start blocking, we can audit, or we can block. Block with override, audit, or block. And for each different activities, we can do that. Copy to clipboard, we can audit only, we can block with override. We can take different actions for all the possible options that we have. And finally, we can notify the users. To permit to user override, we need to notify the users. If we are not notify the users, we cannot enable the capabilities to override. We need to enable this one. We need to show or not policy tips. We can use the custom message. And having that, we can use the capabilities to user override. The other big deal, when you start getting some information, I saw several times that you start using distribution list or personal account to receive the alert. I recommend that you can use share mailbox for that. If something is not correctly implemented, you can easily fulfill an inbox. And if you are using a distribution list, you can easily fulfill the email for the inbox for many users. For that reason, at least when you start with DLP rules, you can use share mailbox that can be created by us for free in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and you can use that for notification. And then one of the latest step is this one. Do you remember that I was configuring here in the global data loss prevention settings this option to collect the files? I configured this, but now for each rule, I am able to identify for which activity I want to collect the original file. And here I can select for each activity, and all the files that matches with my criteria will send to the DLP data collector. That is the container that we create at the beginning of this session with some specific permissions. Something to have on mind that is very important and is a common issue. We created a role here. That role for end users is required to be assigned for all the users. If the role is not assigned, no matter that you have the configuration, the permissions for the endpoint DLP to write in the storage account in the specific container will not be able to permit that. And finally, those data will be lost. In this case, I am applying to the Contoso team, and I need to validate that all my users are in Contoso. If the user are not in Contoso, no matter, as an example, okay, in this case, Jim, Mike, and Randall, that are the user that I'm using. But on my case, my user, that is Sebastian, is not in this list. If the user is not with the role, no matter that you have all the right configuration, that information will not add it to this storage container. That is very important to have in mind. And now With all this configuration, we are able to start working and playing with the data. I have here my user, and on the past, I was working, and let me see if I was doing several things with several configuration. But let's see if I can get some credit number. You can see I press Control C. I press Control C on this notepad, and immediately I get this message. This is the default message, and I will say, okay, I will allow this. Another big deal from the field related to use endpoint DLP, when you send to print, that is another case. When you send to print, you can receive a message. Right now, I make I press the option to avoid, but when you press, when you try to print, in this case, we will see this message. I can justify, I can add a justification to print, but after that, I need to send to press to print again. I need, and that normally is annoying for some customers, because after the block and after you say, okay, I'm allowed to send, you need to send to print again or copy again. You need to do the action for a second time, because if not, that information will not be get. That action will not be finished. Let me copy this one, and now I will go to browser and paste. And now again, let me try to copy. Let me try to paste. And here we can see that the plugin, this is built in on Edge. But if you have Chrome, if you have Firefox, if you have Safari, you need to install that plugin. And here you can see that the DLP is blocking the activity to copy that sensitive information in this one, online notepad. Remember that in my configuration, I was blocking some services. If I use another service, I can block that. In this case, my manager approved this action, and I am able to paste. Someone is asking to restrict snipping tools. Yeah, there is different ways we can block by application names. If you review the question on the chat, someone is asking for snipping tools. Something that we can do is restrict those applications here. But we know that exists several different snipping tools, and someone can go to an open source repo to identify a snipping tool and download that new. And if not listed here, that will not work. In that case, in that specific case, if you are using this configuration here at the top, the advanced classification scanning, this advanced classification scanning permit to work using OCR, optical character recognition, but you need to configure OCR first. This can be very helpful. On my case, I disable right now, but it's something that I can enable and configure. OCR have an additional cost and have some additional steps to configure. To do that, I will show very quick. I remember that in the past DLP session that you can find on Microsoft. On my YouTube channel, I was explaining this design, but here on Microsoft 365 Admin Center, that is admin.microsoft.com, if we go to Setup, and here under Setup, we need to go to Files and Content. Where is I lost File and Content? Okay, why I'm not finding File and Content? For some reason, it's not showing me File and Content, or this one changed. Let me. Okay, I don't know why it's not showing here. Okay. Why is not showing me Setup? Signing and security. For some reason, it's not showing me right now. I will share later, but when you come in here, you will see File and Content. You will see the options to enable Syntex. Syntex is the service for OCR. And after you set a specific subscription and a specific resource group, you will be able to enable the OCR here. And the OCR you can define for which account, for which services. Nothing else needs to be do it. When you enable this one and you set the service, all the DLP rules will start working with OCR. Darren, do you have some question?
Not a question, just wanted to bring something up on here while you've still got this screen up. So Sebastian has already mentioned that unfortunately this has a cost associated with it. So the question we always get asked is, how much is this going to actually cost us? If you can see towards the top of this screen, we've got this try it, the estimator tool, and that estimator tool can run for up to 30 days. And again, you can scope it to various areas, various sites to understand how much it potentially could cost you. With that tool, though, you can start it and you can stop it and you can start it and you can stop it. So if you've got a specific SharePoint site, you could scope it to that SharePoint site, run the estimator tool against it, stop it after a couple of days, and then you can sort of extrapolate that data. So if it comes back and says it's going to cost you $2 for this site, and this site's got 10,000 files on.
OCR in general is $1 per 1,000 image.
Yeah. So again, it'll allow you to start to think around it. The other thing with OCR that I found out is if a file has already been scanned, hashed, and it's been scanned against the content types, it actually caches that file for 30 days. So if it sees the same file, say in SharePoint, it will not recost you for that. After the 30 days and the cache is gone, then it can recost you again. So there are some nuances with it, but always go and try and run that estimation tool first, just to give you that overarching view of how much it's going to cost, because it is a question that everybody asks with us. I just wanted to bring that up, Sebastian, so I hope you don't mind.
No, so thanks for that clarification, Darren.
Yeah.
On my case here, what I did, at least on my case, and that is the recommendation that I do to all my customers, you can create a specific resource group for OCR. In that case, when I configure the OCR, the only service is related to that is this Syntex. The other one, Purview OCR, is another service, and I have another script on PowerShell that I was sharing the past weeks because there is a way to call to an API and run OCR using PowerShell. And I was playing with that one, but in general, this is the one, Syntex. Syntex is the service. and the costs related to that are the costs related to OCR for DLP. Happens that that is delay, but you can open a support ticket as a DCR. You can request to the product group to start releasing soon, I hope, the logs for OCR. That is pending. The product group was working past year to create some logs that permit to identify or have a more granular visibility about what is happening, how many images are scanned, who is sending those images that are scanning, all of that. Right now, that information is not available and it's more complicated to identify or split the cost to different areas or department. Nevertheless, if you configure OCR and you enable for devices, in that case, and here on DLP, data loss prevention, global settings, we have this one, advanced classification, scanning, and protection enabled. We will go to the previous question about snipping tools. In that case, if someone is using any captures tool to take a screenshot and try to copy that, this will send that specific image to the OCR service that will detect the credit card number information or something additional. And finally, we will be able to capture that. Let's try. I don't remember if I have that specific rule, but I just configure normally, at least on all of these, every time that you configure this one, okay, at least it's working. You can see this one was evaluate the screenshot and is blocking the activity because it's getting sensitive information type. That is very helpful. Something additional, another parenthesis. There is several things here that we need to discuss, but there is a tool that you can install. Microsoft 360 have a tool. Let me show you where is that. When I go here, I am in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I go to the Advanced Deployment Guide. Here on Secure Score, Compliance Score, so that was changed. Here under Microsoft Purview Information Protection Setup Guide, there is a lot of steps. There is a lot of information that in some way is hide because you need to do several steps. But in this tool, you can find that exists a PowerShell module that you can use to create sensitive information types that can be used to test different things. For that same reason, okay, I lost that specific, was for DLP, but I am not finding, but nevertheless, I have the specific comment. Give me one moment and I will share the comment. With this comment, I was able to create all these sensitive information types. You can create hundreds of data. You will see that in the old data loss prevention that I did on the past. But let me share quickly the comment here on the chat. Give me one moment, please, and I will share that. Because something, when we are working on DLP, a big deal is try to get some testing data. That is the big deal. And here we have a PowerShell model that permits to get that information. I'm sharing the link on the chat. That is the PowerTel model. And then to obtain the data, we can run the script, that PowerTel model, we can run in this way. And let me try to run that one very quick here. This request to connect, you need to be compliance administrator. Having compliance administrator role, is requesting me in another browser my signing. Give me a moment. And this script will permit to get all my DLP policies, DLP rules, and share some specific sensitive information types that can be created. On this case, previously I created 100 of samples of Swift code. I created 100 of samples of credit card numbers, full names, SSN, and several others that I'm using to make some tests in this case. If I can try to get some driver license, I can get some of these. I will copy, and again, the DLP is blocking, taking some actions. Here, in some of the rules, I set audit only in another block with override, and in another block. If we have different actions over the same sensitive information type, the most restrictive will apply. If I have several rules, let me go back to that point. Here, this is my DLP policy. The DLP policy is a kind of container where I can have several rules. If I have several rules, and for some reason I was not aware that in another rule the driver license was looking, and in another the same sensitive information was looking, and the same, and in one rule I have audit only, in another rule have only a block with override, and in another I have block, the most restrictive rule will apply. That is for that same reason. Here you can see when I try to copy, I am viewing the message that I am not able, and is not giving me the possibility to uh, in this case, I can take the actions to override, but in other cases, I am not able to take that action, and I cannot go forward to copy, paste to a USB, copy through remote desktop protocol, copy to a networker, and several other options. Let's go now to Activity Explorer. Let's go to Activity Explorer to see the matches. When we go to Activity Explorer, let me refresh this page. I was saying, and remember that I share on chat, through the web interface on Activity Explorer, you can get only the path 30 days, but I create a PowerTool script that permit to get more than that, and permit to pie in the result, something that normally happens when you have, and maybe if you have that experience and you are trying to export 100,000, these have a limit. Using PowerTool, you are able to split those results and get all the data. Some is that true for the DLP as well. If there are multiple DLP policies, Yeah, go to the top to the bottom order. Okay, let me see the DLP. I will use this filter for DLP policy rules. Tom that is asking on the chat, yes, if my memory doesn't fall, Darren be right back soon, but he can confirm. But go to the top to the top to the bottom the policies in the way that are applied. But for that same reason, normally I try to use less policies, because if not, you can have several noises when, or you are not totally clear about which one is applied. Now, filtering the data, if I am using, that is the big deal. If I am using, as I mentioned, a prefix, it's more simple to filter. Nevertheless, something that we can do is come into location and filter by location. And here we have some samples about the endpoint DLP. Give me a moment, it's running a little slow. Okay, I will filter by only endpoint devices. Here you can see all the activities, all these activities: file copy to clipboard, paste to browser, file print, file modify, file created, are all the activities, the audit activities that we are collecting, because at least in my environment, I have this one enabled. But for the DLP rule match, we have some specific activities that are nested, and we need to identify which activity was. Normally, when you come in here, we can see the business justification, we can see the credit card, the sensitive information types, where the file was located, the device name, and you can see I need to, something was run in the permissions that I was setting, but for some reason, I am not able to see yet that evidence. We need to review the permissions. I made some changes this morning, and maybe for that reason is not working right now. But here is the big deal, that we need to configure to have the access to the different evidence for all the files. If all is set, the storage account is set correctly, the permissions to the audit users are set correctly, we will be able to get the original file, because that original file is copied to the storage account. Now, we have all the data, and here you can see activity type, file copy to clipboard. This file copy to clipboard is not the same for this file copy to clipboard. Those are the audit activities about all the onboarded devices that are doing anything daily. That normally generate 100,000 of activities per day. Under the DLP rule match, we have this one, and we are able to find that specific file copy to clipboard, and we are able to filter that information. We are almost on time. I will leave some minutes to questions, but let me show this very quickly. Inclusive yesterday, if any of you are following me on LinkedIn, yesterday I was sharing some SQL queries that can be used to get, in that case, yesterday I was sharing for Exchange, but is the same exercise for Endpoint DLP or Teams DLP or any other DLP. And I will try to explain very quickly how we can get that information through Microsoft Advanced Hunting. In that case, the advantage to use Microsoft Advanced Hunting is we can get the past 6 months of data. We can get the past 6 months of data, and for that reason, that can be very helpful. And let me go here, where action type contain DLP rule match. Another big deal. Here, only a couple of thousand are show. Let me get past 30 days. Only a couple of thousand can be downloaded here. But if you need to download more than 100,000 of files, I built another script that I share. Let me put here on the chat. I built another script on that can be used to easily export all the data. Is here on support samples, defender, advanced hunting. I created this another script you can review, or you can find the post on LinkedIn where I explain how you can use this script to create a function that permit to easily export all the activities based on a query.txt file that is created. That is very helpful to get several information. But in this case, okay, it's appeared that it's not showing me yet the endpoint. Something that I can use to start viewing how to filter the data. Let me summarize count by, in this case, is application, run query. Okay, it's not ready yet the information for endpoint, but in general, as I mentioned, from here, from advanced hunting, we can get the past 6 months of data. The advantage that normally I use working on this one is because I can expand all the information coming in a raw data, or JSON. Expand. Why is not getting me this expand? Give me a moment. Extend, no, extend. Extend the equal parse JSON. Where is parse JSON? Raw event data. And with this one, I can create a specific variable for workloads. This is equal to the dot workload, I believe. And after that, I am able to where workload contain exchange. And after that, I am able to start filtering the data in different ways. And in this order, I am able to start playing with the information with the raw event data and inclusive identify the specific policy details, identify the specific rules that are matching, and I can identify if the activity was related to copy to clipboard, a copy to USB, and again, as I mentioned, the big deal here is I can get data from the past 6 months. Zach is asking if I recommend. I recommend to enable that audit all the activities, but first of all, as I mentioned previously, take the time to set the path exclusion here. I saw several times that when the audit all file activities is turned on and you are looking for source code, specifically source code, a lot of activities appears because every time that you browse a page, the web page is source code. And several alerts are created for file delete, for all those temporary files that are created for that pre-chart of or preload of the web page, and that make a lot of noise. But if you take the time to set correctly all the path exclusion, that can be very helpful to reduce that noise that I was mentioning. And we are almost on time. Uh, I will give this a minute for any other question, comment. Please, I'm sharing the survey on the chat. That will take less than 2 minutes to complete, and that information for me can be very helpful. I want to say thanks to Darren to join today to help me with the questions on the chat.
Not a problem.
And again, now we have 10 minutes for any question, comment that you want to share, or if you need to clarify something related to DLP. Today, as a summary, we review the data classifiers, we identify something. Elizabeth, please, Elizabeth, if you can ask on the chat, that will be very helpful. The mic is disabled for this session. For that reason, you can ask on the chat. No, not Zach is asking if we can run a scan for sensitive data against enrolled devices. Not yet. I know that the product group was releasing a preview program, and inclusive. Let me share that it exists, AKI, and you can enroll your test environment or your production environment. And if you join to the customer CCP, I don't remember the second P, if you join to that one, you can join to different programs. And one of the programs was related to call data and how we can collect that information about call data. The other thing is, my recommendation is try to join to that program. It's not required to enroll to the different preview programs. You can only join. And after you join, you will receive weekly an email with all the preview programs, or at least that give to you a quick access to the roadmap, the new features that coming soon. And you will be aware because you will receive that weekly email with all the new capabilities. How do you choose the priority when you have a lot of endpoint DLP rules? Is in order, but as we was discussing previously, is recommend to try to reduce the policies. Normally, I try to recommend to always have only one policy per service, and in the same policies create the different rules. And the priority on the rules is the order that was created the rules, and you can modify the order. I don't know if maybe Darren have some experience to share on that from some customers without mentioning the customers. But here, the only thing that you need to do is moving the order of the DLP to have some priority over others.
Yeah, I suppose with that one, it comes down to firstly looking at the endpoint DLP policies you've got and how you're scoping them. But it is quite right that it is the one at the top of the list is the highest priority. But if a user is scoped against multiple policies, it will do the one with the most restrictive count. So that's where you need to take that step back and look at what you're trying to achieve, what your goal is. And potentially, you shouldn't really require that many policies. And remember, within a policy, you can have multiple rules as well. So if you're trying to sort of just change the different rules or what it's looking for to the different action, you could put the actual rule in the same policy. So it's really looking at that. But yeah, unfortunately, at the moment, it basically looks at everything. That's with the endpoint DLP. But what you have got within Exchange is within Exchange, if you go to the bottom of when you're creating the rule, there is that little tick box to say stop. Once you process this one and you've got a match against it, then stop processing any others. Whether that, I think that's on Exchange and Teams now, whether they'll expand that in the future to other ones. But yeah, sometimes when people start off with these DLP policies, they'll get people coming in and asking for policies, and you'll go and create new ones, whereby really I think you need to take that step back sometimes and say, okay, have we got one that's doing the similar thing? Yes, we have. Then we can scope that out to those people as well. It all comes down to understanding what your actual end goals are.
Thanks for that, Darren. I share again the YouTube channel where I will upload this session today, end of day, I assume. I share the survey. Please, that will be very helpful if you take 2 minutes to complete the survey. I don't know if any one of you have any other question or comment. I hope that you enjoy this kind of webinars. I will, if you are following me on LinkedIn, I will share soon the next topics for February. Normally, I'm trying to do one webinar per month. If you don't have any other question or comment, I appreciate your participation today here in this session. Thanks a lot for joining, and have a great day.
Yep, thanks all. Have a great one.
Let me say bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.